Something that's become more just increasingly obvious and apparent to me as I've gotten older and met so many people from so many countries, from all walks of life and different backgrounds and situations, is I'm increasingly, like, I've always known it from childhood, but it's becoming just more apparent to me how important parenting and family dynamics are.
Oh, yeah.
I think people know that it's important, but I think it's still understated and underrated just how much it impacts people on so many different levels across multiple generations. I think that in the modern West in particular, and perhaps the USA is the epitome of this regard, is there's really such an individualistic and at times selfish mindset where people just don't think long term and about how their actions can affect and influence other people, right? So you see this with everything from the extraordinarily high rate of frivolous divorce and how, and even the response to it. You'll hear people say like, well, why would anyone stay together if they're not happy, right? That kind of mindset, which in most of the world sounds psychotic, and through most of history would sounded crazy. Like there's a lot of reasons why people might stay together even if they're not temporarily happy, especially if there are children. It's like there's lots of people involved and lots at stake here in this situation. And I find that, I try not to be, I'm not a parent yet, and I try not to be overly sort of harsh and critical of parents, but just the mindset that I notice in some people is so, it's just so me focused.
Right, what's in it for me.
And they don't realize how these things affect their children.
Yeah.
How this is going to affect them as they are still children and as they're adults. And, I think one of the greatest blessings I have is, when I talk to people, about my own family or about I think my parents have been married for 48 years now.
That's awesome.
And, I've got a very big, wide family, like super close.
Yeah.
And it's just more and more obvious to me, number one, how increasingly rare that is. And number two, how much of a blessing and an advantage, or to use the word privilege, it is to me and to other people who've experienced that, because you've seen the modeling.
Yeah.
Right. So we are all children, even adults, things are modeled to us. And it's kind of strange to expect someone to know how to do something that they've never been instructed or modeled to do. And so people pick up on different patterns. And of course, patterns can be broken. Of course.
It's really hard.
Yeah. Patterns are broken all the time. But it's just, I've spoken to just so many people now. I mean, you're the same. And you just see these, you see certain patterns, and there's just the human psychology, the way that the mind, body, and spirit are connected, the way that this thing that happened way back then can impact how someone does something now.
Yeah.
And I wish there was I wish there was just more of an acknowledgement and a caution around all of this.
Yeah.
I don't think that, a lot of put it point blank. Like I'm not saying in your particular situation, but a lot of parents mess up their kids.
Yeah.
Like this is by the millions, and you'll have adults behaving in certain ways, and it'll be like, why is that guy doing that? Why is that woman doing that? Why is she doing? And then if you were to sort of rewind and look at the situation, it's like, oh, okay, well that happened and that happened and that happened and that happened, and they never learned how to deal with this and repair all of this damage. Maybe it wasn't even acknowledged. And now there's just all of this dysfunction. And then oftentimes that dysfunction is now passed on again to another generation. And it's quite tragic, really. I think it's one of the biggest issues that is occurring in this nation. And I think, people are understandably very sensitive to it, right? People get offended. People are, hey, don't talk about this because of this, because of that, it kind of hits people there. But I think it's so important for our generation, and I guess younger ones, to be aware of this and to do the best job that we can, particularly people who are parents. But even if you're not a parent, you still have an impact on the younger generation. I mean, I've already got 10 nieces and nephews, and I'm
Yeah.
influencing.
Yeah,
I
aunts,
don't know
uncles,
how many,
cousins. I mean, all of it.
Yeah,
You're a
like
role
I'm
model.
connected to a lot of
Yeah.
people out there who are following me and watching what I'm doing, and yeah, I don't know. I'm just thinking of all these things. Like there's a lot of things. There are many things that just kind of hit me really hard over the last few years, and I'm just like, okay, this is like that. Oh, okay, that's what that means. Oh, okay, that's
Yeah.
why. Even when I look at the way certain traditions run and the reason there's a certain order to doing things that has typically existed in different countries, cultures, religions, and so on for millennia. Okay, and a modern person might look at it and go like, "We don't need that anymore. Why is it that way? Let's just reinvent the wheel." And when that happens at scale, it becomes more and more obvious why certain things are typically done in a certain way and in a certain order and with a certain function. It's like, oh, okay, that's not just some silly old custom or tradition. It's to avoid this problem.
Exactly.
Or it's to prevent this from
It
happening.
worked.
Or it's to minimize. And nothing's perfect, right? There's no perfect system, and humans aren't perfect. But yeah, that's just a sort of thought that's that's just becoming more and more apparent to me.
Yeah, and I mean, I really try and beat that drum, especially with the men. It's like, it's your responsibility.
Yeah.
Like, you're the CEO of a company. Everything the company does or fails to do is your responsibility. You're a family man. You're a husband. Your marriage is your responsibility, first and foremost. So stop blaming other people. You want it to be better, take action. And so, to your point of like, cycles can be broken. Yeah, it's taken me over a decade of like a lot of work, lots and lots of work. And I'm fortunate enough that I've been able to afford a lot of the work that I needed to do. Most people can't, right? So wherever you are, however much money you make or what background you come from, like getting it right with your kids, with your marriage first, is the most important thing a man should focus on, right? Save for like exceptional case, like honestly, you're an exceptional case, right? You have all this ability to influence people around the world and travel and all that kind of thing, right? Okay, you're not the norm. I think we can both agree to that, right? Most people work their job, they live their life, and they're going to do what they do until they pass away, right? So what's the number one thing they should focus on is their family first, because when you mess that up, you're just perpetuating the brokenness. Yeah. And it spreads outward like a plague. Whereas if you fix it, instead of a plague spreading, you're actually the cure, right? And so, I've made tons of mistakes, and it's been really hard. And but it wasn't until I stopped playing the victim, right? Oh, I'm, well, no, because this happened to me, then blah, 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 just excusing away my behavior. Until that really died in me, nothing changed. So when that died, and then I just truly surrendered to Christ and said, Lord, I know better. I clearly have not been doing better. Yeah. I'm going to put you back in the driver's seat. Those two things are what actually shifted the direction of my life. And it wasn't until that actually happened that our marriage started to improve, my ability to be a better dad improved. My emotional regulation is significantly better now. I think this is another thing that most men are just really, at least in the West, very incapable of, is understanding that you are an emotional being. Men handle emotions differently than women, but it doesn't mean that you have zero emotion. Stoicism is not the absence of them, it's the control over them. Yes. And your emotional regulation, to me now, when I look at men or leaders, is for the thing I look at most to see how good they really are. So if your 6-year-old gets frustrated and it makes you lose your frame, are you really leading? Or are your emotions in charge? You're going to let this little kid throw you off your game? Yeah. Real manly. Oh, your wife is struggling with something, so you're going to blow up at her? Real manly, dude. Like, so when you frame it in that way, probably stings a little bit. Yeah. But men need their cages rattled to realize, like, guys, this is serious. Yes. Like, getting this wrong repeatedly over time is why we have the culture we have today. And it's got to stop.